All right. Hello and welcome. First off, I want to issue a sincere and heartfelt apology as I was just on my channel earlier today and realized that it had been almost a month and a half since my last uploads, December 8th, the day after my birthday. Like, really? It's been that long? Doesn't seem like it's been more than a week, maybe 2 weeks at the most, but wow. Okay. So I quickly just recently uploaded the next Dragon Quest VII video and the next Oracle of Seasons video. So, yeah. Apologies for that. Time just flew by. Yeah. Between the holiday season, family gatherings, work schedules, time just flew by. Anyways, enough excuses. Apologies for that. And now for the main course at hand. As you can tell by the box art you're looking at and the soundtrack you're hearing. Breath of the Wild. Like any game in gaming history, band, artist, album, song, etc., like anything in entertainment history, some people will love it, some people will hate it. And whether you like it or not, your opinions are your own and they're not totally wrong, as it is all just opinions. There is no set in stone fact. So, for those who hate the game, hey, to each their own. You're right to dislike the game. I mean, there's probably a lot of games you like that I don't like, so we're even there. But for me personally, I love this game. And for some of the gripes against it, well, again, you're not totally wrong. I mean, even the one that I resent the most overall is this idea that that Breath of the Wild changed Zelda. I mean, yeah, to be fair, for those who got into the series via games like Twilight Princess or Skyward Sword, for you, yes, Breath of the Wild is a different beast, so to speak. Doing away with the linearity and the companion characters. Totally different type of game for you. But for people like myself, who have been Zelda fans since the late 80s when the first game was the only one that existed, Zelda 2 hadn't even come out yet. For us, Breath of the Wild didn't change a damn thing. Keyword there, change. It just brought the series back to its roots, back to what we loved about the series in the first place. The open world. I mean, like I've said in many other videos before, the original NES, The Legend of Zelda, Zelda 1, as open as an 80s NES game could be. And personally speaking, the single solitary one and only reason I'm still a gamer, much less a Zelda fan to this day, back in 1988, as I've said in many videos before, just when I was about to give up on video games as linear trash, Castlevania, Ghosts and Goblins, linear bullshit, always the same enemies, same order, same pattern, same platforms to jump over in the same style, same every frickin' time you play the game. Just when I'm about ready to give up on video gaming in general, like, hey, if I want something that's going to be the same every time, I'll stick with books and movies, thank you. Somebody introduces me to The Legend of Zelda. Wow, what a concept. A game that could be different every time you play it. You can go through the levels in suggested order or switch things up and go through them in any order. Wow. Interest in video games saved. And here I am all these decades later, solely and only because of that game. I tolerated the linearity of games like Ocarina of Time because of how epic that game is overall, but was never a fan of that. In fact, I even mentioned that as I played through the game, how I resent the game for being so linear. So yeah, I mean, as I've pointed out in many videos already, I'm sorry, but for me, linear Zelda games will always be a sticking point because of that fact that if the first Zelda game had been as linear as Link's Awakening or Ocarina of Time, I wouldn't even be a gamer today, much less a Zelda fan. So yeah, linear Zelda for me just doesn't work. I mean, it does, but I would rather have games like Breath of the Wild that brought the franchise back to its open world roots. Didn't change a goddamn thing. Just brought it back to its beginnings. Praise be the developers for that. As I jokingly said in someone's Twitch stream comments once, not that long ago, praise be the Zelda developers for this game. Doing away with all that crap that had become normal in Zelda, the so-called Zelda formula. Throwing that in the garbage where it belongs. Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, enough said on that subject. And again, like I said, for those who got into Zelda with the more recent games, for you, yes, Breath of the Wild is different. Yes, I can understand that. But anyways, enough said on that subject. Another gripe I keep hearing against the game is its lack of soundtrack. To which I can, again, kind of agree with what he says as he's playing the soundtrack in the background. But again, one thing that I keep in mind when I'm listening to people gripe against the soundtrack is what's the name of the game? Is it called Legend of Zelda Breath of the Epic Soundtrack? No, it's called Breath of the Wild. So given that fact, I can kind of overlook the lack of a soundtrack. The idea wasn't an epic soundtrack. It was to immerse you in the wild, waterfalls, birds chirping, etc., etc. Breath of the Wild, not Breath of the Epic Soundtrack. Yeah. That said, the absence of, like for example, in Hyrule Field, Central Hyrule, you have what's clearly the remains of Lon Lon Ranch. Right down to that little tower in the back corner that you could, as a kid, reorganize those crates and get to the crawl space and back to find a heart piece. Clearly, the ruins of Lon Lon Ranch from Ocarina of Time. So where's the Lon Lon Ranch theme from that game? Or Kakariko Village from A Link to the Past or remastered for Ocarina? So while I do kind of agree that the game could have used more of a soundtrack, I can overlook that because, again, it's not called Breath of the Epic Soundtrack, but Breath of the Wild. Given the nature of the game, the lack of soundtrack is kind of forgivable. And besides that, the other problem I have with that is, for those who've been around the channel long enough, probably heard me more than enough times diss on Final Fantasy IV as a prime example of a game that has a great soundtrack, but the rest of the game sucks. To be fair, since I've made those videos, I've played the Pixel Remaster and kind of like the game. Granted, the remaster only, but still. I stand by that idea that a good soundtrack can kind of be misleading. What if the rest of the game sucks? You just gonna sit there listening to the soundtrack? Anyway, so yeah. Soundtrack kind of hit or miss. I can agree or disagree, but I'm certainly not going to hate the game because of the lack of the soundtrack. The lack of dungeons, another common gripe I hear against the game. And again, another one that I can kind of agree with. The Divine Beast, only 4 of them. To be honest, Majora's Mask only had 4 dungeons, and it's a stellar game, but the Divine Beasts, on the other hand, feel like the same thing, just repeated. Yes, you kind of got a point there. Yeah. But there are also some of the shrines which are completely optional and therefore aren't quite the same thing. But some of those shrines are just as long. Like the one in Northern Death Mountain, the one with the blue flames, where you got to use a torch or arrows to carry the blue flames from one torch to the next, or one candle to the next, whatever, and then do a spin attack on that final one to open the last cage gate. That thing is almost as long as some of the dungeons in other Zelda games, though. Yeah. Or the one right next, well, not right next to, but close to the tower in Central Hyrule. The one that's covered with, the one that has several different guardians in that area. That shrine, Cam Attack, I think it's called. Shrine of Power, or whatever, has several different stages, puzzles, enemy combat areas that overall can be just as long as some of the dungeons in earlier Zelda games. So, yeah. So while the whole point is kind of moot since the shrines are optional, but still, for those who are going through them, some of those shrines are just as long as dungeons in other Zelda games. So Which brings me to another common gripe I hear against the game, that with this game, I don't really agree with at all. I mean, Tears of the Kingdom, between the ground, the underground, and the sky islands, definitely much larger world map, and a lot of times not much to do there. But for this game, not so much so. I mean, yeah, if you're just speedrunning the game, sure, you're going to skip over a lot of the stuff. But for those who are even attempting a 100% playthrough, you're never that far away from a shrine with a few side quests, a Korok puzzle, an enemy base camp, an enemy Lionel, Hynix. You're never all that far away from something to do. So I totally disagree with that. I can't agree with that in the slightest. Unless, of course, like I said, unless you're trying to speed run the game. That would be the only way I could see that argument even having any merit to stand on. But for any attempt at a 100% playthrough, bullshit. There's always something to do. Granted, optional, yes, but still, always something to do nearby to wherever you are on the world map. You're never more than a minute away from something to do in that game. Yeah. So, let's see. Music, dungeons, changing Zelda. Oh, just running through my head things I wanted to talk about. Points that I've heard people make against the game that enemy variety. I've talked about that. Lionel's kind of saved the game from that. Of course, Tears of the Kingdom has the Gleeok. The first time a Gleeok, like the Lionels were for Breath of the Wild, the first time a Lionel had been in a 3D Zelda game. Yeah. Same thing can be said for the Gleeok. Tears of the Kingdom was the first time the Gleeok had been in a 3D Zelda game, so that was kind of cool. Yeah. Enemy variety I've already talked about. The game could have used more variety, but oh well. Oh yeah, that's the lack of story. That's another common gripe I hear against this game. Well, first and foremost, the story is there, but broken up in those memories that you can get. Secondly, well, with all due respect to my gamer friends out there, I don't really give a rat's ass. I don't play games for their story. I'm sorry. If I want a good story, I'll read a book or watch a movie. I play video games for the gameplay and only the gameplay. Story is just something I tolerate because I have no choice in games like Ocarina of Time or Final Fantasy VII. Story is just something I tolerate because you have to if you want to play the game. But if I had my way, even those games would have minimal story. Like Final Fantasy 1 or Dragon Quest 1. If I had my way, every game would be like that with minimal story. The more minimal the story, the better, as long as it had good gameplay. So yeah, that's another one of those arguments that I don't agree with at all because I don't really care about story in game. Story is just something I tolerate because I have to if I want to play the game. But at least this game, what little story it has is skippable. Like Dragon Quest XI, the cutscenes are skippable. So yeah, I don't want the story, I could just skip it. The game here doesn't have much story, and for me personally, it's a better game because of it. So I totally disagree with that one. Or I did. I agree with it. I acknowledge it as fact, or as a valid opinion, but don't really care. In fact, again, repeated for emphasis. In fact, I think it's an even better game because of its lack of story. I don't see the problem with that. I mean, again, if you want a story, read a book or watch a movie. Like I do, whenever I want a good story. That's what Hollywood is for. Granted, they kind of suck lately, but that's another subject for another time. That's all opinions as well, so yeah. Anyways, of course, people talk about how they often get lost in the vast world map. Well, you know, if you're not used to that kind of game, I can kind of see that. If you're used to the more linear platformers or, the more linear progression Zelda games like Link's Awakening or, I can kind of see that. But for me, while that used to happen on my first playthrough, I loved it. Again, it was granted the NES original Zelda game had a much smaller world map in contrast. Granted, that was an '80s NES game, so that was kind of expected. You couldn't have a massive world like Breath of the Wild on an NES cartridge, but yeah, again, difference of opinion and difference in how we became Zelda fans, I guess. For me, having been introduced through the first game, I loved that feeling. Where yeah, it was all about exploration, find your way, and personally, I loved it. Not having some companion character say, "Hey, go here." Yeah. Hey, listen. Yeah. No, I don't want to listen. I want to explore and find out myself. Go away. Yeah. Of course, that's not just a problem with Zelda. That's a problem with games in general today. Also, usually 9 times out of 10, so goddamn handholdy. Pardon my language, pardon my French, but yeah. So coddling, it's ridiculous. Like Metroid Zero Intellect. I mean, Zero Mission. Good game, but good God, is it handholdy. Yeah. I hate that in games. Maybe it's just the 80s NES gamer in me, but still. I loved that feeling of, where do I go? Exploration. Explore, explore, explore. And I frickin' loved it. For some people, it's probably a gripe against the game. And again, in your opinion, in your perspective, you're not wrong. More power to you, to each their own and all that friendly jargon like that there. But for me, that was one of the strengths of the game. And one of the many reasons why I still consider Breath of the Wild in final summation 9 out of 10. Easily, hands down. No doubt about it. No questions asked. Easily the best video game of the 25th or of the 25th or not. Yeah, okay, me. Of the last 25 years of the 21st century. Easily. The only game I could think of that's come out since the year 1999 changed into 2000. The only other game that's come out since that can even hold a candle to Breath of the Wild would be Dragon Quest XI. That's it. I mean, even the successor, the sequel, Tears of the Kingdom, while it's a good game, it's no Breath of the Wild. It relies too much on that building mechanic that I hate. That I always just play a Breath of the Wild and just paraglide and climb over everything and skip that. Why build a craft to ride over something when I can just climb over a mountain and get past it that way? Yeah. I mean, Tears of the Kingdom is a good game too, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's not, but it's not as good as the game that it sequels. If I were rating games of the last 25 years, I would say Tears of the Kingdom is number 3, behind Breath and behind Dragon Quest XI. Probably. I mean, I would have to think more deeply on that, not just whip together a quick list, but yeah. Just off the top of my head, thinking quickly of games that have come out in the last 25 years, yeah. I mean, Mario Odyssey would have to be on that list. Anyways, that's another subject for another time. Anyways, yeah, it's already been almost 20 minutes. Damn, am I a big talker or what? More like a hot airhead. Ramble on, son, ramble on. That's what I've been doing for almost 20 minutes now. Talking about anything and everything and nothing all at once. Well, 9 out of 10. Easily the best game of the last 25 years. And I say 9 out of 10 because in my opinion, there is no such thing as the perfect 10 for 10 flawless game. And dare I say, as I've said in other videos before, dare I repeat, for anyone who tries to say there is, I think you're just being butt blind fanboy or fangirl. because of how much you like the game, you're overlooking its flaws, which, I find myself doing sometimes as well, so you're not alone in that. But I try to get past that and be fair and objective, be fair and not just, oh, yeah, it's bullshit. I would say Breath of the Wild is a 9 out of 10, 9.0 or however. Yeah. It has a few issues that could have been, like climbing in the rain. I hate that. At least with Tears of the Kingdom, you have the option of getting the frog suit that eliminates that. Climbing in the rain sucks. I used to say lightning, but that's hey, it's supposed to be wild, it's supposed to be nature. Thunderstorms are a thing of nature, so at least they don't have tornadoes. Hey, imagine that in any video game for that matter. Having to take shelter because of... Actually, that'd be kind of interesting if I think about it. But anyways, Weapons breaking I used to hate. Of course, in more recent playthroughs, I've kind of actually grown to like it. It makes you think. You come up to an enemy base, for example. You stand there just before you're close enough for them to see you and start coming after you. You stand there thinking, do I really want to do this knowing that at least one of my weapons is probably going to break? Do I really want to waste that good weapon on these? Yeah. It makes you think about that kind of thing. You can't just go charging headfirst into everything. Kamikaze, damned be the consequences kind of thing. It actually makes you have to think about that. Do I really want to waste my weapons on these guys? Nah, I think I'll let them live. Yeah. So yeah, I kind of like that actually. I mean, I know that's a controversial subject and one that I used to agree against. Used to hate that myself, but yeah. In fact, I even commented on that in some of my earlier videos whenever talking about the game. Used to say how much I hated that. But again, since I've replayed the game again more recently, just earlier this year, well, yeah, just earlier this month, it's only the 21st, so yeah, only 3 weeks into the year, but yeah, having just recently replayed the game earlier this month, yeah, again, makes you think. You can't just go blindly rushing into every enemy base you see, and you actually have to, do I really want to break my weapons on these guys? I think I'll save that durability for more meaningful boss form. Yeah. Anyways, climbing in the rain does suck. There is no excuse for that. I mean, yeah, but if you wanted to be realistic, how could Link climb mountains in the first place? Wink, wink, wink. Yeah. What, does he have suction cup hands? What? How is he even doing that climbing to begin with? If you really wanted to be realistic. So why are we having climbing in the rain issues? Yeah. That sucks. There is no excuse for that. I'm sorry. I mean, again, you can maybe argue strategy. But what strategy? You just got to wait for it to stop raining. There's no strategy in that. You just wait for it to stop raining. Or go somewhere else. I mean, that's just annoying. Yeah. The lack of music, as I've already addressed, is kind of annoying, but again, given the nature of the game, Breath of the Wild, not Breath of the Epic soundtrack, I can kind of overlook the lack of a soundtrack. The lack of enemy difficulty, well, it is kind of annoying to be fighting the same enemies repeatedly, just slightly different colored for different difficulty tier, like early Zelda games. But again, Lionels, how epic they can be, especially when you get into the silver and the golden Lionels. Yeah. Kind of make up for that. I mean, it's still a problem, don't get me wrong. I'm not totally excusing it, but... Yeah. So yeah, again, 9 out of 10. Not perfect, as no game is. But again, easily the best game of the last 25 years, hands down. No other game coming out since 2000 even holding a candle to it. Yeah. much needed return to the open world roots of the Zelda series. Now, that having been said, now that this game has existed for almost 8 years, couple months shy of 8 years now, I would not be totally opposed to another linear Zelda game. As much as I love this game, I wouldn't want every game to be the same thing. I mean, that's the problem that the Zelda series had dug itself into in the first place, getting into what people call the Zelda formula, game after game after game after game. You know, yeah. So yeah, for the next 3D Zelda game, whenever it may come out, I would not be totally opposed to another linear story-based progression type game again. And if I get sick of that, I can always just go back to this game. So yeah. Anyways, that could be another subject for another video. Probably won't ever get around to making that one, but yeah. My thoughts on what future Zelda games should be. I mean, there's a part of me that would like every Zelda game to be open world, but that would get kind of stale and repetitive, just as the so-called Zelda formula had gotten stale and repetitive for me, and why I could not get into Twilight Princess or Skyward Sword no matter how hard I tried. I wanted so deeply to love those games because they were Zelda games, but the linear-based story progression just killed it. I just could not get into those games, no matter how hard I tried. Then this game comes along and, hey, cool. Anyways, enough of my ranting. As always, for anyone still listening to my rambling opinions, as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye. 9 out of 10.